So welcome everyone. We've got a nice audience here. We'll move along here quickly. We're going to cover several areas. Here's the agenda. We're going to go over the profiles that are available for trial and implementation, and then those that are available for public comment. The ones for implementation include the management of acquisition protocol. It's a new supplement published in 2017. This profile supports a collection of scan protocols from the acquisition modalities through their review on a protocol manager and redistribution to modalities. We're going to review the standardized operational log of events. Again, another new supplement published in 17. SOL provides or defines a way to exchange information about critical events that are occurring primarily in workflow processes and timelines and other things in a way that information can be analyzed and displayed using standard analytical methods. Very helpful from a business perspective in terms of optimizing workflows. Another profile developed for trial implementation was the radiation exposure monitoring for nuclear medicine, the REN-NM. The supplement was published in 2016 and addresses the tracking and reporting and management of radiopharmaceutical administered doses in a manner similar to others that are already adopted for ionizing radiation via the REM profile. IHE Radiology is also going to present some major upcoming changes to existing profiles, which includes the results distribution, a new supplement published in 2017, which deals with sending results, reports, etc., to existing installed base systems. The results are defined with structured content and support other integrated profile requirements such as follow-up of non-critical actionable findings. And then the web-based image access, acronyms WIA, formerly known as MHD or -I. And WIA provides for image sharing and interactive viewing of studies via restful services. And it supports different backends such as XDS and DICOM and DICOM Web. So with that overview of the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to the first speaker, who will have to identify themselves, who will be discussing the acquisition protocol trial implementation.
Correct? That'll be me, Kevin.
Okay.
Oh, Kevin. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so this profile is called Management of Acquisition Protocols, or MAP. I'm Kevin O'Donnell from Toshiba, who will be presenting. And so the motivation for this one is, on a given CT scanner, one scanner, you may have up to 100 or in some case even more protocols. And the problem is that many hospitals don't have just one scanner. They've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. And you can see how the problem can quickly scale up, that trying to keep tabs on what protocols are in use, what are the different changes that have been made on the different systems, and particularly if a site has multiple models or even further multiple vendors' systems, managing that huge collection of protocols is quite challenging, to say the least. The impact that has is, first off, on quality of care, that the way you produce consistent, good image quality is by carefully managing your protocols, setting the parameters appropriately for the features of the system, for the types of studies you do, for the types of patient demographics you're dealing with, patient sizes, et cetera, and making sure those are used consistently. And that's really difficult unless you've got a way to manage them. Similarly, it impacts efficient workflow, that the details that are in the protocols, things like the series description, the procedure codes, are used to trigger a lot of downstream details such as hanging protocols, image processing steps may be done depending on the procedure code, doing 3D, doing CAD, and then into the reporting workflow. You may be organizing your work list around these things. You may be queuing up report templates. So all of this gets messed up unless there's consistent use of series names, procedure codes, and the like in the protocols. For managing radiation dose, if you're going to manage the dose, you have to manage the protocols. Having protocols that have been designed for appropriate levels of dose and then using them consistently for different age groups and weight groups and the like is sort of a cornerstone of doing good dose management. And finally, if you're doing analytics, if you're trying to track, what your turnaround times are, if you're looking at your throughput, and a lot of this has dollar implications, it's very difficult to do good data analysis unless things are properly tagged and labeled, and a lot of that is involved with protocol parameters. So the concept of this profile is how do we enable centralized cross-vendor review and approval of acquisition protocols? And so the idea is that first you upload protocols to a protocol archive, and then periodically you review and approve those. And so periodically may mean, a monthly task. It could be a weekly task. If you wanted to monitor changes live and intervene daily, it's really up to the site and to the features of the protocol manager, but all of those would be possible. We show the protocol manager as being separate from the protocol archive so that, for example, a PACS might choose to implement the protocol archive actor, and then it holds on to all of your protocol data along with all the other departmental data. You could also group the protocol manager with the protocol archive and have sort of a combined protocol management storage solution. So as with most IHE profiles, that's really up to the product implementers. But as far as the profile is concerned, they can be separate actors, and the transactions are designed that way. So the protocol manager, in addition to reviewing and approving them, will also be able to make some modifications. Now, it says within limits. There are certain details, things like series descriptions, things like protocol codes, that would be very sensible to manage centrally. There are other aspects, such as some of the detailed, for example, X-ray parameters that may only be editable on the scanners themselves, that there may be things relating to the scanner's capabilities, limits that need to be put on those changes. There may be cases where modifying one parameter has a roll-on effect and other parameters need to be updated in sync. And since that sort of logic is only available on the scanner, those more technical details, you'll need to take notes and do those edits on the scanner. But some of the basic organizational edits can be done on the protocol manager workstation. And then finally, once they've been approved and edited appropriately, those can be redistributed out to the different scanners. So decide which protocols you want running on which scanners, which ones are approved. That information gets pushed out. So the technology that underlies this, there's three main pieces that we put together and profiled. The first is the DICOM CT defined procedure protocol object. This is how you encode a complete protocol. So two details to pay attention to here. First is this is a complete protocol. In the headers of some of the image objects that are already recorded in DICOM, you have a few protocol details, but typically you don't have a complete protocol, all of the details that are needed for the protocol to be run. So this object does contain that full set of parameters. Second thing is it says CT. So the profile is written with the idea that this can work for any modality. However, currently we only have a DICOM object for the CT protocols. This is relatively new. There is some work underway to look at angiography, and there's been interest expressed around PET and MR, but that work hasn't started yet. So at some point in the future, this profile may be applicable to other modalities. Initially, it's just for CT. Second item that's in here is the DICOM protocol approval object, which basically encodes a list of protocols and the associated approvals. So you can point to a batch of 10 head protocols and say all of these are approved for use in a particular clinical trial or use at a particular site. And then finally, to move the objects around, this is a little bit cutting edge, I guess. We've adopted the DICOM web specification. So people are probably familiar with the conventional DIMSI DICOM services, the CStore, the CFind, that starting in 2004 and really kicking into gear around 2012, DICOM defined a number of RESTful services for doing the same things over HTTP connections. So basically using web-style programming and web-style protocols, which are a little more familiar to some of the modern developers. They're maintained completely symmetric with the DIMSI services so that they're fully proxyable and the like. So one of the services is the NPI service for non-patient instances. And since protocols as defined are not inherent to a given patient, they're stored outside of the patient study series hierarchy. And there are transactions then to store, query, and retrieve those. So the DICOM protocol objects, there's what we refer to as a defined protocol. And so this is before that you've done a scan, you can list out what type of scanner it's appropriate for. You can give details like patient instructions and patient positioning. You can include technical details like what the KVP should be. And we'll talk about this a little bit in the next slide, but these you can put in constraints. So for example, for the KVP, you can specify that for this protocol, it's okay for the KVP to vary, say, between 80 and 140. But you can also specify certain parameters have a specific value. The recon kernel will be the standard kernel. So this is what feeds into the scanner so that the scanner can run the scan. And then when you've completed the scan, you can also create a performed protocol object. Now, the performed protocol object does go in the patient study series hierarchy, goes in alongside the images, and you can have a complete record of the exact parameters that were used for a particular study. We are including the defined protocol in this profile. We are not yet including the performed protocols. So we kind of wanted to go step by step, let people ease into this. And so the profile currently addresses defined protocols. There are suggestions on the table to bring in a performed protocol option later, which would also then involve the modality storing the specific protocols used for each and every patient, but that'll be a future thing. So the defined protocol details, if you're a scanner vendor, basically this means you'll implement transcoding between to and from your internal format to this DICOM format. It's important to note that the vast majority of these protocols are vendor and model specific. So we do not have an expectation that you'll be able to take one protocol and run it on 3 different vendor scanners, simply because the engineering is different, the design is different, the operational envelope for the systems is different. So these are intended to be for very specific models, which is another reason why it's necessary to have a system for managing the large collection. We expect because of that there'll be a fair number of private tags included because each particular device will have certain model-specific details that are relevant to it, but not relevant really to any other system. So we expect to be fairly normal for there to be private tags in there, alongside a number of public tags, which are hold the very common types of parameters. So that you can be able to review these on a central workstation, we've introduced a private tag dictionary, and you can see the name and tag for the sequence. But the idea is this includes, for all these private tags, a name, a description, a VR, and encoding details, so that on your central workstation, even if these include a lot of private tags, you can see the name of the parameter and the value of the parameter, and you can compare across different systems and make sure things are lining up. So for review and comparison, the private tag should not be an obstacle. As I mentioned a moment ago, that in defined protocols, these are constraints on parameters. So you may constrain a parameter to have a particular value. You can say that it has to have a value that belongs to a set or falls in a range. And so, this allows you to give some flexibility, for example, to the technologist who is modifying the protocol at runtime based on certain individual patient characteristics. We've included a capability called the constraint violation significance. So if you've said, for example, that the KVP has to be between 80 and 140, you can indicate that that's simply an informative constraint, and if they go outside that range, that has no particular meaning. You can indicate that that is worth a warning or worth a failure, which is essentially saying if the tech goes outside of that, you should either notify them that they're probably violating the protocol, or that they shouldn't run the protocol if they've moved them outside that range. Now, this is essentially a voluntary feature for the scanners to implement or not as they see fit, since most of these details are going to be coming from the scanner in the first place. And then finally, there's an instruction sequence in there which can be used for filling in instructions to the tech, and it allows for both a brief text tag that you could put into the user interface, or a longer piece of text that might be in a pop-up window if someone asks for help. So within these constraints, we have what we call specification sequences that contain all these parameter constraints. There are 5 main groups. The first is the equipment specification, which allows you to constrain what scanner, make, model, and version this protocol should run on. And so typically the receiving scanner will look at that to see whether this is an appropriate protocol for itself. There may be cases where you can run across different versions of the same model. There may also be cases where you can run across different models of the same manufacturer. I wouldn't expect anything that would run across multiple manufacturers. You can put constraints on the patient characteristics, so saying that this is for age 0 to 16 or 16 and up lets you indicate adult protocols, or you can set up pediatric protocols. You can set up protocols for weight ranges, etc. Then you get into the acquisition elements, and so the idea is that each acquisition element is, for example, a localizer or a helical, and then for each one of those you can put in the parameters for KVP, revolution time, all the typical parameters that you'd expect and typically see on the console. To highlight, this is also where you can put in dose check triggers. That anyone who's been following the radiation dose tracking work that's been going on in the last number of years may be familiar with dose check, where when a protocol is modified and the modification exceeds a certain predicted dose threshold, that notifications will come up to the operator. Setting those thresholds can be a bit tedious, and if you want to set them consistently across different vendors, using your protocol management workstation would be a convenient way to get those set. The reconstruction elements, again, similar to acquisition, each reconstruction that's programmed into the protocol, do a set of thin slices, do a set of thick slices, is in a separate element specification, and parameters such as the kernel to use, slice thickness, the series description, etc. And then finally, storage elements are things like to support the auto-send features that are on a number of the scanners, things like send to PACS, send to the 3D workstation. You configure what the destination AE title is, what the DICOM web URL, XDS destinations, etc. So that may seem like a fair bit of stuff. The scanner only encodes the details that it needs and that it supports. So this does not mean that all scanners will do all of these different things. They will encode all of the parameters that they need, and that's what you'll find in the objects. The approval objects, I briefly mentioned earlier, the idea is you have an approval subject sequence that lists here are the collection of protocols that I'm going to approve. You then make an assertion about them. These are, for example, approved for use at this institution. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the institution code is Mercy Hospital, so they've been approved for use at that hospital. And then there'll be details such as who made the approval. In this case, it was the chair of the protocol committee, Dr. Marcus Welby, and the date and time the approval was made, as well as an expiration time. So, for example, if you want to require that protocols need to be re-reviewed annually, here we can see that by 2018, this week, it'll need to have been reapproved, or the approval will have expired. I won't go through the full list here, but just to give you a sense of some of the different kinds of approvals you can approve for an institution, a clinical trial. The device may itself create approvals to indicate that a certain protocol is indeed inside its operational limits or has been optimized. And we've got another code there for flagging that a protocol has been deprecated. Lastly, getting into the transportation, the restful operations, in this case doing a store. This was a basic post operation. You'd be using a URL that would be, for example, to the image archive that you're storing to. There's a resource collection there called Defined Procedure Protocols, and then the UID of the particular instance that you're storing. We permit both DICOM and JSON formats, so you can store these as a binary DICOM object if that's how the modality wants to queue these up, or if it's easier to program it using JSON, and there's a bit of an example below there of what the JSON would look like. Fairly non-threatening. You know, most of this, it's the same tags and values that you would see, just a little more human readable perhaps. So should be fairly easy to construct these objects and then to push them over an HTTP connection. So just to give a bit of a sense of what this will look like, we saw earlier that we've got the batch upload initially. Our expectation then is each time a modality creates a new protocol, you can see the creating new protocol A, it would immediately upload its most recent version to the archive. The archive might be looking for real-time updates or may just simply review them on a weekly basis, for example. So as we get down to the bottom right of the screen, you would initiate your periodic review. You might go in and say that protocol A1, they made a change that wasn't quite the right thing, and they messed up the series name, for example. So you're going to fix the series name to match the department templates and the standard way of naming series, and then approve those new protocols, disapprove protocol C, which you do not want used anymore, and push those back out. So the protocols and the approvals would get pushed back out to the modalities. There's another few use cases you may want to think about. Having the archive would let you set up a protocol library. On a given scanner, for example, let's say you've got 3 of that scanner and you don't normally do, complex interventional protocols in room 3. From room 3, you could query, find a list of protocols in your library and pull over an appropriate one so that you could run it. Similarly, you could back up and restore protocols by pushing them off to PACS and then pulling them back later. This may be helpful during certain migrations or upgrades. So just to close the seminar, this is the basic flow of transactions that we saw at the beginning from the modality. You store to an archive, the protocol manager can query retrieve and then pushes them back out. With these other use cases, in addition to storing protocols, you can also store protocol approvals, and then you can do query and retrieves of both protocols and approvals. That lets the modality, for example, consult a library. Similar for the protocol manager, when it's done the edits, it probably makes sense to stash a complete collection in the protocol archive so it can store the protocol back. and it may want to cache its collection of protocol approvals there as well, if those are being implemented as separate actors. For the approval objects, you may simply keep those in a local database and then constitute the DICOM instance when you need to push it around. You don't, as with most DICOM, you don't need to keep it internally in DICOM format if you don't want to.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That's a great review of, at least from the user's perspective, somebody in an imaging center or hospital. I'm really looking forward to this protocol, so getting it implemented.